With a massive form too big to breed, they sold her for meat until one human bought and claimed her.
Dornis Reach was alive in a dull, mechanical way. Steam hissed from cracked joints in the pipes. Vents clattered as they released built-up pressure, and rain turned the grit on the ground into thin black mud. The air was damp and smelled of rust, boiled fungus, and burned lubricant. The market square sat wedged between three leaning steel towers, each wrapped in a web of cables. Dim amber lamps, mounted high above, flickered irregularly, casting a weak glow that never reached the far corners. It was auction day. A loose crowd had gathered near the center, not because they had business here, but because standing in the market meant standing near the heat vents. Men with stained coats huddled together for warmth. A few women kept their hands buried deep in their pockets. Traders leaned against support beams, waiting for something they could resell for a quick credit. On the raised platform stood Neryl. She did not blend with the crowd. She couldn't. At nearly 7 feet tall, she was impossible to miss. Her wrists were bound with a short length of leather. Not tight enough to restrain her, just enough to mark her as property. She stood still, her chin level, her eyes lowered. She had learned long ago that staring too directly at the people who judged her only made them speak louder. Her frame was massive and full. Broad shoulders, heavy hips, strong thighs. Her chest strained against a torn silk drape that had once been a dress. Now little more than a rag knotted at one shoulder. The fabric clung to her purple-toned skin where the mist had soaked it through, revealing the shape of her stomach and the swell of her breasts. Wet blue hair hung in long ropes down her back, reaching almost her hips. She heard every word from the auctioneer. "Too big to breed," he told the crowd. "Can't carry young," someone repeated under their breath. "Better for meat," another voice said, not bothering to lower the volume. The words hit as they always did, not as a surprise, but as a confirmation of the quiet verdict she had lived under for years. She kept her breathing steady, though her heart was quick in her chest. At the far edge of the square, a man stepped in from the east tunnel. Corinthale. He was 35, lean, with a face shaped more by years of quiet work than by hardship. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, a few strands plastered down by the damp air. A layer of stubble traced his jaw. He wore a weather-worn brown coat over layered shirts, the sort of outfit made to last through long days outside, and boots dull with age and use. Corin was not a trader, not a butcher, and not a buyer of livestock. He was an archive cataloger for the abandoned freight depots that dotted the Reach. His work was solitary, walking through silent warehouses, scanning crates, and updating records no one cared about anymore. He had come to the market today for a single reason. The depot on the east side was missing a shipment record, and the only copy was held by a stall keeper who worked the square on auction days. He didn't plan to stop. He had planned to walk the length of the square by the record copy and be gone in 10 minutes. But as he crossed through the crowd, his eyes settled on the auction platform. Neryl's gaze was fixed on a patch of empty metal beside the platform, as if she could step into it and vanish. Corin saw the slack in the leather tie around her wrists. He saw the sheen of damp silk against her chest, the way her shoulders stayed squared despite the murmurs. He also saw the boy laughing at her from the front row, pointing at her legs. The butcher raised a hand and gave a bid, low, the kind given when someone wanted only the weight of flesh, not the person. Neryl's jaw tightened. Corin's mind shifted quickly. He had no use for another mouth to feed. He had no need for company. But he had seen too many things in the Reach mark for disposal, simply because no one wanted to record them otherwise. And here, in front of him, was a ledger entry about to be written in a way that would not be undone. He raised his hand. His voice was calm when he named his price, high enough to erase the insult of the butcher's offer, low enough not to start a bidding war. A few heads turned. The auctioneer's tone faltered for a moment, but then he called it accepted. The clerk brought a chip tablet. Corin signed slowly, then added a second transfer without being prompted. "For what?" the clerk asked, frowning. "To remove any cull flags," Corin said, "and update the ledger now." The clerk hesitated, but changed the entry. Corin watched until the update was complete. The leather tie came off. Neryl stepped down from the platform, her bare feet finding the wet rungs of the steps. She moved deliberately, keeping her balance. She stopped beside him a half step back, not because she was being led, but because she was measuring him. "Neryl," he said, speaking her name like it was already familiar, "walk with me." They left the square. The voices faded into the hiss of rain and the hum of pipes. Corin didn't speak again until they reached the narrow passage to the east tunnel. "My place is small," he said, "dry, locked from the inside." Her voice was steady when she finally asked, "Why me?" "Because they were measuring you for the wrong reason," he said, "and because I can change one line in a ledger today." At his flat, a single-room unit in a steel block building, he unlocked the door and stepped aside to let her in first. The space smelled faintly of paper and clean metal. A single amber lamp lit the room, warming the walls lined with numbered boxes. In one corner, a narrow bed sat under a folded blanket. A heater ticked softly. "There's hot water in the stall," he said, pointing. "Takes 20 seconds to heat. Clothes are in the chest beside it. Eat first." He set a bowl of steaming noodles on the table. She sat, adjusted the knot in her drape so it wouldn't slip, and took the bowl in both hands. The broth was rich and salty. The first mouthful brought an ache to her stomach from the sudden warmth. She ate slowly, her eyes fixed on the table. He didn't rush her. When she was done, she stood and carried the bowl to the counter. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm clearing a depot shelf. Heavy crates. Paid work if you want it." She met his eyes for the first time since leaving the square. "I want it." He nodded once, not smiling, just acknowledging the choice. She stepped toward the stall, towel in hand. Behind her, the heater ticked and the pipes hummed. For the first time in months, she felt the edges of her own body without the weight of someone else's decision pressing down on it. Rain eased to a fine mist by morning. Pipes thumped as the building woke. Corin boiled water and set 2 cups on the table. He moved quietly so the floorboards wouldn't creak. Neryl sat up slowly on the bed, checked the door bolt out of habit, and scanned the room the way someone does when sleep has not been safe for a long time. The heater's steady tick held her in place. She let her shoulders drop. "I start early," he said. "We can eat at the depot. They keep a hot tap on." She stood, tightened the tie at her waist, and felt the pull of the linen shift against her ribs. The fabric fit better now that it was dry. "What do you want me to carry?" she asked. "Crates of tags and broken readers," he said. "I need to sort a mislabeled shipment and pull 1 record copy from stallkeeper. That's why I was in the square yesterday." She watched him for any sign this was a test. "You buy me from a platform, then you say I have a choice, then you say there's paid work." "That's the order," he said. "If you want to leave after breakfast, I unlock the door and you go. If you stay, I pay you for your time. 10 credits for the day and meals. More if the crates are worse than I remember." "10 is fair," she said, and filed the number beside the other facts she was collecting about him. Steady voice, no sudden movements, no reach toward her without warning. She still didn't trust him. She did trust the way the ledger entry had changed because she had seen the clerk update it with his own fingers. They stepped into the hallway. The air smelled of damp plaster and old soap. On the second landing, a neighbor in a patched cardigan nodded once at Corin, glanced at Neryl, and kept moving. No comment, no stare that lingered. That absence mattered. Outside, the street shone with wet metal. They walked side by side, not touching, their pace matched. He cut through narrow alleys to avoid the morning press near the main vent. When they reached the depot row, he keyed the side door with a card worn to a faint gloss. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Light strips hummed overhead. Stacks of crates formed corridors more precise than the streets outside. A sign on the wall read, "East Reach Logistics Archive, offline storage." Another smaller notice read, "Report anomalies to desk." This place was the city's backbrain, he said. Everything that moved went through here. Then funding moved, people left, and the record sat. I'll log what's left, so when someone asks where a part went 5 years ago, there's an answer. And the record copy in the square, she said. A vendor called Haskin sells duplicate shipment lists he pulled before the system died. I needed one to close a case file. Small job. Yesterday I saw something bigger. They passed a desk with a dead terminal and a stack of paper forms tied with string. Neril placed her palm flat on the desk for balance and leaned to look down the long aisle of crates. Her body relaxed. She knew rows and numbers and weight. I worked river barges as a loader, she said, before the coals came to our sector. I can stack and move faster than most men. If the crates have handholds, I won't drop them. He looked at her hands, at the calluses along the base of her fingers and the small scars across her knuckles. Good, he said. We'll start with base 7. They worked without talk for the first half hour. He read stencils aloud. She lifted, pivoted, set. The crates were awkward more than heavy. Dust rose with each shift and settled on her shoulders like a fine film. Sweat gathered at her collarbone. When he stepped close to slide a crate onto a higher shelf, he said, "On 3, and waited for her nod before they lifted together. The rhythm built. He marked a tag. She moved a box, and the piles found order. At the break, he pointed to a small sink area. Hot tap, he said. She held her hands under the stream and watched the dirt run off. The water stung her knuckles where old cuts were still tender. He set a tin of noodles on the counter. She ate standing, not because he told her to, but because standing felt safer in a place with exits on both sides. He noticed and angled himself so he didn't block any path. What did they mean yesterday? He asked after a few silent minutes, when they said too big to breed. Is that superstition or something else? She swallowed and weighed the cost of answering. Where I'm from, Zyrene women with my build are considered high risk. Older clinics used narrow standards. Hybrids like me got pushed out with a stamp that said unfit. It became a rule that wasn't a rule. Men repeated it until it sounded like fact. Some of us had children. Some didn't. The market doesn't care about nuance. It repeats what is cheapest. He didn't interrupt. He let the shape of her sentence sit visible between them. Thank you, he said. I asked because I don't want to use the same language without understanding it. You didn't, she said. You changed a ledger. He looked like he wanted to argue that the ledger was a small thing. He didn't. He rinsed his bowl and set it upside down to dry. After we finish base 7, we'll stop by Haskin's stall for that record copy. If you prefer to wait outside the square, say so. I'll go, she said. If I leave your side, I choose it. Not because I'm afraid of them. They returned to the stacks. A crate slipped once when a strap split. She caught the weight at her hip and set it down with both hands. The shift pulled tight across her chest. She felt the old burn of eyes on her body. She looked up quick to check him. His eyes were on the strap, not on her skin. We'll retie with wire, he said, already pulling a coil from a drawer. He cut a length, looped it, twisted, and checked the hole with a steady tug. She watched his fingers, how he tested each twist, how he didn't look at her until the crate was secure. It didn't erase the heat in her face, but it cooled it. By noon, base 7 was clean. He counted the finished stacks, wrote the totals on a board, and looked almost relieved. You just saved me a day, he said. You work clean. You plan, she said. You leave room to change course. He nodded once. Let's get the record copy. The square was quieter than yesterday, but still busy. Haskin's stall sat under a torn canvas awning. Paper lists hung from clips. The man behind the table had a thin face and restless fingers. He saw Corin and smiled with only his mouth. The archivist, he said. You found what you were missing. I will when you hand it over, Corin said, and named the shipment number. Haskin sifted through a stack, then hesitated when he saw Neril. He didn't speak to her. He flicked a glance at Corin, as if to ask a question he knew better than to voice out loud. Corin didn't give him room for it. Price is the same as always, he said, placing the credits on the table. Haskin slid the copy forward. Watch yourself, he said. Cull teams are jumpy after a mix-up last week. Corin held his stare until Haskin looked down. Your copy business depends on me keeping the ledgers clean, Corin said. Don't spread rumors to sell drama. They left the stall. Neril walked close enough for comfort, but not so close it read as fear. At the edge of the square, a city clerk in a gray jacket looked up from a handheld and stepped in their path. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't armed. He wore a badge that meant access, not authority. Records checked, the clerk said, tone flat. Routine. Corin didn't break stride. He stopped only when they were clear of foot traffic and held out his ID card with 2 fingers. Corin Thale, Archive. This is my contracted assistant for the day. The ledger was updated yesterday. East Market sale, reclassified as labor with early termination. The clerk scanned the card, then scanned Neryl's wrist where a faint ink stamp from the auction still showed. Sale number EM 4713, Corin said. He didn't look at Neryl while he spoke because he didn't want her to feel like an object being referenced. He kept his body between her and the rest of the walkway so no one bumped her. The clerk checked, watched his screen refresh, and nodded. Updated. No flags. You're clear. Neryl watched his face for any trace of contempt. There was none, only boredom and a need to finish the stack of checks in his queue. He moved on. Her breath eased. This was not a chase. This was a system doing what a system does. It could still cut you if you weren't careful, but today it didn't. Back at the depot, the afternoon went faster. Work makes time straight. Corin showed her how to read the margin marks on old tags. She showed him a faster way to stack without crushing the lower crates by rotating every third box a quarter turn. Small exchanges. Useful ones. Near day's end, he set down his marker. Payment, he said, and counted 10 credits into her hand. He didn't touch her skin. He let the coins sit on her palm until she closed her fingers. If you come tomorrow, the rate stays the same, he said. If you don't, the door still opens from the inside. She slid the credits into the pocket of her trousers. The weight felt strange and right. I will come, she said, then paused. People will ask why I'm with you. What will you tell them, he asked. That I work, she said, and that you pay on time. He accepted that answer like a contract. They reached the flat at dusk. The neighbor in the cardigan was boiling something that smelled like cabbage. Down the hall, a baby cried and then stopped. Safe sounds. Inside, Corin set a pot on the heater plate and cracked 2 eggs into a pan, added scraps of noodle and greens from a jar. The simple, heavy food turned the room warm. I have questions, she said, standing by the table. Ask, he said, not looking away from the pan, so the questions could be easier to say. What do you want from me at night? He kept his voice steady. I want you where you feel safe. If that's the bed, take it. If you ask me to sit in the chair until you sleep, I will. If you wanted to leave the lamp on, I will. If you want to touch my hand, you can ask. If you don't want any of that, we don't do any of that. She watched his back and measured whether she believed him. What if I want your hand, she said, the words quiet and sure, but only here. She touched the back of her shoulder with 2 fingers, not a performance, just a map. Then that's where it stays, he said. What if I stop wanting it, she asked. Then it stops, he said. Her throat tightened, not with tears, but with a release that was almost painful. Where did you learn to speak like that, she asked. I don't speak like that, he said. I listen like that. I have been alone a long time. People who don't listen end up alone by accident. I ended up alone on purpose. That changes what you value. He plated the food. They ate in silence for a few bites. The noodles were crisp at the edges. The eggs were firm. She felt the food settle in her stomach like a clear signal that today was over and tomorrow would come. I was taken to the market because the woman who housed me couldn't afford the feed allotment after her son lost his shift, she said without ceremony. She chose him over me. I don't blame her. She gave me a roof for 3 months. When the coal team logged me, she signed because they said the city would pay her debt. People do what their fear tells them to do. He didn't say he was sorry. He said, I hear you. What is your mission? She asked, using a word she thought might be his. To keep the city from lying to itself, he said. If the records say a crate never existed when I saw it with my own hands, the city gets meaner. If the records say a person is flagged for coal, when I can remove the flag and make the entry say labor, the city gets a little less mean. I can only do a little. I do it anyway. She nodded once. That is enough for me to understand you. After they washed the dishes, he unfolded a blanket near the shelf again. He set the lamp lower. She stood by the bed and touched the linen at the edge, then looked at him. The chair tonight, she said. Sit there until I sleep. He moved the chair to the corner near the bed and sat, hands on his thighs, feet flat, body relaxed. She lay down. She didn't ask him to touch her shoulder. Not yet. She turned on her side, hair against her cheek, knees drawn slightly up. The lamp cast a small pool of light that didn't reach the ceiling. Outside, the river horn sounded once. The building settled. "I will come to the depot in the morning," she said. "I'll make tea," he said. Her eyes closed. Her breath slowed. He waited until it deepened and then waited longer. When he stood to turn off the lamp, she spoke without opening her eyes. "Say my name," she said. "Neryl," he said. She slept. He turned the lamp off. The room held the kind of quiet people work hard to build and then guard. He sat back down in the chair and let his own eyes close for a few minutes. Not because he had to watch her, but because he had told her he would stay, and staying was the point. Questions that had been left open were now anchored. Why he was in the square, why she was on the platform, how the ledger had changed, whether the city would contest it, what the work was, how she would be paid, where she would sleep, what he expected. They were small answers, the kind that make a day work. Tomorrow could hold more. Tonight held a door that locked, a chair where a man kept his word, and a bed where a woman slept without checking the bolt twice. Morning light was thin in Dornis Reach. It filtered through the high windows of the depot block as if reluctant to enter. Corn was already awake, boiling water for tea in a dented steel kettle. Neryl shifted on the bed, not startled this time, just slow to leave the warmth. She sat up, rubbed her eyes once, and checked the door bolt, not in fear but out of habit. "You said you'd make tea," she murmured, her voice still low from sleep. He poured a cup, slid it across the table toward her. "Huh, careful." She cupped it in both hands, inhaled the faint scent of dried mint, and sipped. "What time do we go to the depot?" "Soon. They ate today. Mostly light crates, but we'll have to remark some for transfer. I'll need your height to reach the top rows." As she drank, her eyes went to the credits in her pocket from yesterday. She tapped the fabric once, checking the weight. "You keep ledgers clean. Do you ever get in trouble for it?" He shook his head. "Not yet. No one in authority checks old records unless someone tells them to. And the people who might tell don't usually notice when a cull entry turns into a labor entry. They just see the list get shorter and move on." She studied him. "So, no one will come looking for me?" He met her eyes. "Not because of the sale. I made sure of that." It was a question she hadn't asked in the square, but had carried into the night. Now the answer sat plain between them, and she nodded once, as if filing it in her own mental ledger. The streets were damp and quiet as they made their way toward the depot. Steam rose in lazy curls from ground vents. They passed a food stall where a man sold fried dough from a flat pan. Corin bought two, handed one to her without comment. The sugar stuck to her fingers. She licked it off without breaking stride, a habit from years when you didn't waste even a grain of sweetness. At the depot, the air was cooler than yesterday. Neryl moved easily among the stacks, her height making the upper shelves simple to reach. Corin noticed how she handled the crates. Tight grip, careful steps, no wasted movement. He worked the ledger board while she sorted. "Yesterday you said you worked barges," he said while writing. "How long?" "For years," she said. "Two upriver, two downriver. They moved me to shore work after my knee took a bad hit in a load slip. I limped for months. The clinic cleared me for labor, but the coal team saw the report and marked me high cost. I kept working until my sector was closed. After that," she shrugged, "no one wanted a worker my size unless it was to pull carts or lift until I broke." He listened without stopping his pen. "You could have left the Reach?" "Where?" she asked. "I had no travel credit, no sponsor. Leaving means stepping into a place where your name is unknown and no one feels responsible if you disappear. I stayed where the ground was bad but familiar." Her tone wasn't bitter, just measured. He understood. By midday, they were deep in Bay 8. One crate near the back had no tag at all, only a scrap of paper tucked under the strap. Neryl handed it down. Corin opened it, frowned at the contents, loose parts for obsolete data readers, still in their foam sleeves. "This shipment shouldn't be here," he said. "It was supposed to go to central repair." "You'll send it?" she asked. "Yes, and mark it correctly so no one else buries it again." She leaned against the crate stack, wiping her hands on her trousers. "That's what you mean when you say you keep the city from lying to itself." "Exactly," he said. "Objects and people. The ledgers should match what's real." In the afternoon, they stopped for food again, this time at the depot canteen. The room was half empty. A few other workers glanced at Neryl, but but said nothing. She sat across from him with a bowl of broth and small rolls. "You sleep here alone every night?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "No family. No, I had a brother. He left the Reach years ago. No contact since." She considered that. "No one you answer to. Only the archive head, and he cares about the work, not my company." It was another unspoken question settled. Who might interfere in whatever this was becoming between them? They returned to work until the lamps overhead shifted to evening mode. Corin locked the depot door behind them. The walk home was unhurried. At one point, she slowed to watch two children kicking a battered ball down an alley. Her expression was unreadable, but her pace picked up again without comment. Back at the flat, Corin set a pot of water on while she went to wash up. She emerged in the linen shift, hair damp from the stall. The sight was not an invitation, but a statement. She was comfortable enough to move in his space without guarding every inch of herself. Over the meal, she asked the question that had been forming since yesterday. "Why were you in the square exactly at that time? I know you needed the record copy, but you could have come earlier or later." He thought about the truth. "I delayed on purpose. Haskin keeps better stock on auction days, and fewer eyes are on his table because they're on the platform. I planned it that way. I didn't know you'd be there." She accepted the answer, though her eyes stayed on him a beat longer. "If you hadn't seen me, I'd have bought the record copy and walked home," he said, "and probably thought about what I saw on the platform when I tried to sleep. But I wouldn't have gone back for you the next day. Not because I didn't want to, because once you're marked and sold, it's harder to undo." That honesty seemed to matter more than any comforting lie. She nodded once, finished her food. Later, she stood by the bed, fingers on the edge of the blanket. "Tonight, you can sit in the chair again, but closer." He moved it so it was within arm's reach of the bed. She lay down facing him, eyes half closed. "If I reach for your hand, don't pull away," she said. "I won't," he said. She did not reach for it, but the fact that she had set the condition was new. The lamp stayed on, the room warm and still. He kept his word as always. The questions left hanging from the first 2 days, the permanence of the ledger change, whether anyone would come for her, where he fit in the city, why he had been in the square at that exact moment, were now answered in plain language. What remained were quieter uncertainties, what she wanted from him beyond safety, and whether he could give it without changing what made her stay. She fell asleep with the chair at her side, and for the first time, her breathing was slow from the start, without the long pauses of someone waiting for danger to pass. The third morning started with a sharper chill. The heater needed a tap to kick the element back to life. Corin crouched, adjusted the dial, and waited until the tick steadied. Neryl watched from the bed, blanket pulled to her waist, hair tied back with a strip of cloth she had cut from the old silk drape. She was fully awake, not groggy, and she moved with the alertness of someone whose body was done waiting for harm that never came. "I want clothes that fit," she said, practical and direct. "Not just for inside, for work, for the square." He nodded. "There's a seamster 2 levels down who trades in salvage fabric and makes quick alterations. We can stop before the depot." They drank tea, standing at the table. He laid out the day's plan the way he always did, giving her the shape of the hours in simple pieces. Bay 9 remark, a short resupply run for ledger ink and wire. The seamster, a stop at the hot tap, back to stacks. She listened and weighed it against what she needed from the day, then added one item without asking permission. "I want to register a clinic check at the public station," she said. "Not for a report. For me. I want a new baseline." He didn't flinch. "After lunch," he said. "Station on Vesper Lane is quiet at that hour." The seamster shop was a narrow rectangle of light and thread. Racks of reworked garments hung on pipes. A short man with quick eyes and a square jaw stood on a crate to meet Neryl's height. He measured without commentary, chalked the side seams of a heavy work tunic, and pinned trouser hems while keeping his fingers clear of her skin. 2 hours, he said. "You pay now. Pick up before night lamps." Corin paid. They left in their old clothes and cut back toward the depot. At the main vent crossing, the boy who had laughed at the auction stepped out of crowd pocket and stared, a quick, startled look that recognized her, and then looked away when Corin met his eyes. No words, no gesture, just the short, awkward silence of someone who had seen a person where he expected to see a product. Neryl felt the glance on her skin and let it pass. She did not break pace. Bay 9 held more chaos than the last two. Some stacks had settled crooked. A crate on the top tier had split along a seam and bled small parts into the gap below. Corin set a ladder and climbed with a coil of wire. Neryl stood at the base and braced it with both hands, feet planted. He didn't test her grip. He trusted it. "Yesterday you rotated every third crate," he said over his shoulder. "It spreads weight across the stack," she said. "You get fewer crushed corners. It also makes theft harder. Thieves expect straight patterns." "That a barge trick?" he asked. "Doc trick," she said. "Men take what is easy first." He retied the split seam and passed down a small cloth bag of loose parts. She caught it one-handed, set it aside, and caught the second bag the same way. The work was simple, physical, and honest, and it filled their bodies with clean effort. By the time the canteen bell sounded, their shirts were damp and their hands carried the fine scratches of cardboard and wire. They ate at a side table. He finished first and watched her soak a roll in broth and press it into the side of her bowl to catch the last oil sheen. After the clinic, he said, "We can check the west wall for the old tag lists. I think there's a folder wedged behind the conduit." She wiped her fingers on a square of cloth and met his eyes. "At the clinic," she said, "if they ask, I'm here under your labor contract." "Yes," he said, "if they assume whatever they will assume, you do not correct them," she added. The statement held steel and calm. "I won't," he said. "You speak for yourself unless you ask me to speak." The clinic on Vesper Lane was clean in the way places are when people running them care about minimum standards and know they cannot do more. A nurse at a small desk checked them in and, after scanning Neryl's wrist stamp, glanced at Corin without curiosity. "You can wait there," she said to him, pointing at a row of hard chairs. "She'll be called." Neryl sat in the exam room with a physician who looked roughly her age and wore a name strip that read J. Salin. The woman's hands were steady. Her questions were brief. "Any current pain?" she asked. "No," Neryl said. "Old knee injury healed." "History of pregnancy?" the physician asked, tone neutral and without the hesitation that often came with the question. "No confirmed," Neryl said. "I was told I wouldn't carry." The physician did not respond to the implied statement with an opinion. She took vitals, checked joints, looked at the old knee line, and typed the results into a local console. "Your pressure is normal," she said. "Blood oxygen normal. Muscular development high. Fatigue markers low. The old injury shows good stability." The old comment, Neryl said, testing whether the clinic would echo it, about my size and risk. "The outdated guideline you're referencing was withdrawn," the physician said, still neutral. "Outcomes depend on individual health and support, not only on height or weight. If you want a fertility panel, the lab can draw it. If you do not, we end here and you leave with a standard summary." Neryl considered the offer. She understood the cost of data in the wrong file. She also understood the cost of guessing with no numbers. "Draw the panel," she said. "Keep the results private." "They are private by default," the physician said. "You can choose to share them later or not at all." When Neryl stepped back into the waiting area, Corin stood. He didn't search her face for answers. He offered water from a paper cup. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "We can go." On the walk back, she said what she needed to say without ceremony. "If the panel shows one thing, we make a plan. If it shows another, we also make a plan. I will see the results first." "Agreed," he said. The seamster had the clothes ready when they returned. The work tunic fit across her shoulders without pulling. The trousers sat at her hips and allowed a full stride. In the mirror, Neryl watched herself stand in practical fabric that did not try to hide or emphasize anything she didn't choose to present. The image was simple and strong. She paid the man a thank you with a short nod that meant more than a word. They took their time getting back to the depot, choosing a longer route to avoid the midday crowd. A woman at a corner stall was boiling barley and greens in a wide pot, and the clean smell of it cut through the usual market scents. Neryl stopped, bought a small bowl, and ate standing with the spoon held low so she didn't drip. Corin watched her face ease. Food that wasn't a scramble had a way of telling the body it would be fed again tomorrow. The last hours of work moved without friction. They found the folder behind the conduit, exactly where he had guessed, and inside it the tag list for a set of readers that matched the loose parts from a split crate. Corin smiled in the quiet. Not wide, just the small kind that said a problem had lined up with a solution. He set the lists under a weight on the desk to flatten them. On the walk home at dusk, the square held a different sound than usual. Someone had set up a small electric keyboard on a crate and was playing a simple melody. It wasn't skilled. It was steady. People passed without stopping. Narrow slowed for 2 counts and then kept moving. The music marked the day as finished and would be gone by morning, and that was enough. Inside the flat, the air felt warmer than the hallway. Corin set 2 cups on the table and made tea. Neryl stood at the foot of the bed and pressed her palm flat on the mattress once. A habit now. She turned to him. "Tonight, I want your hand," she said, clear and steady. "On my shoulder like I told you. Only there. If I move it away, it stops." He stepped to the chair, brought it close, and sat. He lifted his hand and waited. She lay down on her side, hair pulled back so it wouldn't tickle her neck, and nodded once. He placed his hand on the back of her shoulder. His palm was warm. He did not move it. He kept his breathing even. Her chest tightened, not with panic, but with memory, the way a body remembers pressure even when it is safe, and she let the feeling rise and recede while counting the rhythm of his breath and the faint tick of the heater and the soft hum of pipes. After a minute, her muscles unlocked one by one. She moved her shoulder a fraction toward his hand, a small, deliberate choice. He didn't change his pressure. He didn't take more than she named. "Corin," she said into the blanket, testing the shape of his name in this context. "Yes," he said. "You said your mission is to keep the city from lying to itself," she said. "What is mine if I choose it?" He thought for a second, careful not to shift his hand. "To decide what your body means to you, when no one else is writing it down," he said. "And to make that meaning visible in the way you stand, work, eat, and choose. If you want help making room for it, I help. If you don't, I watch you do it." No comfort words. No promise he couldn't keep. She accepted that. The heater clicked. The building settled. The sounds of other people's lives moved down to a quiet floor. She didn't fall asleep right away. She kept her eyes open and studied the line where lamplight ended and the darker wall began. Her thoughts circled practical things. The clinic results, the budget of credits she now held, the plan for Bay 10, the seamster's receipt, the taste of barley and greens, the way her new clothes allowed a full reach overhead. Under those, a second line of thought ran slower and heavier. He had stayed at the chair for 2 nights. He would stay again. He did what he said he would do without effort or show, and he had not once asked for anything he had not first named as a question. When sleep took her, it was clean. Corin waited the same extra minutes as the night before, then eased his hand away and set it on his knee, not because the contact had weight, but because the boundary had meaning. He turned the lamp down, sat back, and let the day replay in his head like a ledger. He checked for errors. He found none that he would change. Questions that had lingered. How the world would read her beside him. Whether the clinic would mark her. Whether clothing that fit would change the way eyes moved over her. Had answers now. Not final, but solid enough to build on. The city had not turned toward them or away from them. It had kept moving. Inside the small, warm room, 2 people had adjusted the details of their lives by a few precise degrees, and those degrees felt like the start of something that could hold. The lab sent the results in the morning queue. A thin slip printed from the depot console when Corin logged in, the paper warm against his fingers, the letters clear and simple. Baseline normal, no current contraindications, further evaluation optional. He didn't read it twice. He walked it back to the flat without folding it, set it on the table, and stepped aside so Neryl could take it first. She read each line slowly. Her face didn't change. She flipped the page, checked the codes at the bottom, and exhaled once, a short breath that sounded like she had been holding it since the needle touched her skin. "No walls," she said, tapping the line about contraindications. "No guarantees either. Real information," he said. "Yours to keep." "I'll keep it," she said, and slid the slip into the pocket of her work tunic, not because she needed to carry it, but because she wanted it near. They ate standing, just tea and a small bowl of porridge with chopped greens. The heater clicked off and on with the draft. Outside, the corridor doors opened and closed as the building emptied into the day. Neryl tied her hair back and tightened the belt on her trousers. Bay 10, she said, ready to work. Bay 10 was heavy. 4 deep rows of sealed cartons, marked with codes that didn't match the manifest board. Corin read the marks out loud. Neryl moved the boxes in a steady rotation, lifting from her legs, pivoting at the hips, keeping her back straight. She worked without spectacle and without apology. Dust settled on her shoulders. Sweat darkened the collar of her tunic. Corin adjusted the stack plan as she discovered the fastest way to empty a row without trapping them in a corner, and he let her pace set the hour. At first break, he handed her a tin of water and leaned on the cart beside her. "The results," he said, voice low so the word didn't echo in the empty bay. "Tell us what we already started to suspect." "That I'm not broken," she said. "And if nothing happens, it isn't because of size or a sentence someone wrote years ago." "Yes," he said, "it will be because of timing or choice. And if we choose not to try, that is also an answer." She studied his face for any sign of relief or disappointment. She found neither, only attention. "I need to say something plain," she said. "If you want me only because of what I can be for you, a mother, a partner, a body that fits a picture, this ends. If you want me for me, we keep going. I can't build on guessing. I want you," he said, the words steady and unforced. "If there's a child, we build for 3. If there isn't, we build for 2. My want doesn't change." She listened to the cadence, not just the content. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be exact. She nodded once and finished the water. They worked through noon without stopping because the stack pattern required completion once started. At the last carton, her grip slipped and she caught it against her hip. The corner scraped her skin through the fabric. She hissed, a sharp sound from surprise more than pain. Corin set the carton down and stood still long enough for her to check herself. She pushed up the hem, saw the reddened line, and lowered the cloth again. He reached for the first aid tin and held out a square of salve gauze. "You can apply or ask me to," he said. She took it from him and pressed it in place. "Hold," she said, and guided his hand to the edge so he could keep pressure while she tied the strip around her waist to secure it. His fingers were warm and even. He didn't press harder than she told him to. When she finished the knot, she moved his hand away and stepped back. "Good." They ate late at the canteen, 2 bowls of stew, thick with root and grain. A clerk from a front office took the table behind them and started a loud story about a broken scanner until she noticed Neryl and lowered her voice by instinct, not malice. Neryl watched the small shift and filed it with the other signs that the world around them was adjusting to her presence without being asked. In the afternoon, Corin pulled a narrow folder from a dead terminal's cabinet and found a thin packet of stamped envelopes. "Request forms," he said, dusty for a reason. He tossed the top 3 into a discard bin, stopped at the 4th, and frowned. "This one is yours. The auction office sent a copy to the clinic 2 months ago. Someone flagged you high cost without exam notes." Neryl's shoulders went tight. "Name on it." He showed her the stamp. It matched the clerk who had processed her sector's last ration audit. "Do you want me to file a correction?" he asked. She looked at the envelope again, then shook her head. "No, we already made it irrelevant. If you file it, they will notice you. Save your weight for a day that needs it." He put the envelope back into the folder and locked it in a drawer. Choice respected. Ledger kept clean by omission as much as by entry. They closed the bay early and left the depot in the blue light that came before the lamps fully shifted. A light wind ran the length of the corridor and dried the sweat on their necks. Corin stopped at a street vendor and bought a small jar of oil used for machine joints. "For the heat or dial," he said at first, then added, "and for your shoulder if you want it." Back at the flat, Neryl washed in the stall. When she stepped out, she wore the new tunic without the undershirt, the fabric clean and simple against her skin. She stood by the table, hair wet and straight, and watched him warm food on the plate. "I want to make a change tonight," she said. "Tell me," he said. "You can sit on the bed," she said. Back against the wall, feet on the floor. "I will decide the distance." He nodded once, turned down the lamp, and did exactly that. She crossed the room and sat at his side, close but not touching, letting the quiet stretch so her body could catch up to the decision her mind had made. He didn't fill the space with talk. He let the heater's soft tick count the seconds. When she placed her hand on his jaw, his breath changed, not faster, just deeper. She moved her thumb along the line of his stubble, testing the texture. "Look at me," she said. He did. Up close, his irises were almost black, and the small scar on his eyebrow was a clean notch. She studied him the way he had studied ledgers, checking for changes, confirming consistency. "I will kiss you," she said, the way someone states a task before doing it. "All right," he said. She leaned in and pressed her mouth to his. No rush, no correction, just pressure and heat. He didn't chase. He let her set the angle and the length. When she pulled back, she watched his face for any sign of claim. She saw only focus. She kissed him again, and this time he met her with a small adjustment, careful, responsive, not leading. Her chest eased. She shifted closer until her thigh touched his. His hand stayed on the blanket, open and visible. "Your hands," she said, taking one and placing on her hip, over fabric. "Here. No higher until I say. Here," he repeated and held exactly there. She moved his other hand to the side of her neck, not on her throat, just below the ear where the skin ran warm. "Light," she said. He lightened his touch. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, monitoring the old reflex that sometimes made her body freeze and her mind float. It didn't come. She stayed present. She kept his eyes. She kissed him again and then again, longer, until the muscles behind her shoulders loosened and a quiet hunger rose that wasn't about proof or reclaiming anything, just about wanting contact with this man in this room where the door locked and the ledger had been changed. He spoke first, a small question shaped as a statement. "Tell me when you want more." She tested the weight of that permission, then took his hand from her hip and set it at the curve of her waist. "More," she said. She guided his palm along the line of her side, over fabric, mapping what was allowed. His breath stayed steady. She let her own run faster. She placed his hand on her ribs, under the edge of the tunic, skin to skin for a second, and stopped there. Heat moved through the contact in a clean line. She watched herself as much as she watched him, and when she felt the first flicker of alarm, she moved his hand back to safe ground and watched it quiet immediately. No push, no question. The alarm faded. She leaned her forehead to his. "You listen even when you want," she said. "I want to keep wanting," he said. "Listening is how that works." She laughed once, short and real, and kissed him again, slow. Minutes passed like that. Small adjustments. Clear words. Heat that didn't need to turn into anything else tonight to be real. When she finally pulled back, she didn't move away. She rested against him, her weight solid on his side, head under his chin, breath warm through his shirt. He sat still, one hand on her back, the other on the blanket, and watched the lamp's glow catch the curve of her cheek and the damp line where her hair met her temple. "I have one more answer to give you," she said after a while, voice calm. "People will ask me why I am with you. I will tell them the truth. You bought a line in a ledger and returned it to a person. Then you waited for that person to speak. That is the reason." He absorbed it without trying to deflect it with modesty. "I'll accept that," he said. She shifted, found a better angle against his shoulder, and closed her eyes. "If I say stop," she said, "we stop. If I say stay, you stay. Tonight, I say stay." "I'll stay," he said. They stayed that way for a long time. The building settled. Someone down the hall laughed and then coughed. Water ran through the pipe in the wall and then stopped. The heater dial clicked once and held. Before sleep, she reached into the tunic pocket and took out the clinic slip. She unfolded it and looked at the lines again in the dim light, then folded it and set it on the crate beside the bed within easy reach. She placed his hand back on her shoulder, the same place she had named the night before, and covered it with her own so the contact was hers as much as his. "Tomorrow," she said, eyes closed, "we pull Bay 11. After that, I want to learn the terminal. If I can read the codes, I can fix the shelf plan without waiting for you." "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll show you everything I know." Questions the first days had left open were now answered in action rather than talk. what the clinic numbers meant for her choices, whether he could want without taking, whether she could want without losing herself, whether they could build a working rhythm that made room for heat without breaking the trust that held it. The answers were clear enough to sleep on. He turned the lamp down to a low bar of light, watched her breathing settle, and kept his hand where she had placed it until she was fully asleep. Only then did he ease it free, not because he wanted distance, but because she had named stop for the night by sleeping, and he honored the word, even unspoken. The next day started before the lamps finished their shift. Corin brewed tea and set a second cup at Neryl's place without speaking. She dressed in the work tunic and trousers that fit, tied her hair back, and checked the heater dial out of habit. The clinic slip stayed on the crate beside the bed, folded and within reach. She tapped it once with a fingertip, as if to confirm it still said what it said. At the depot, she said, "I want the terminal." "You'll have it," he said. "We'll start with read-only and move to edits when you're ready." They walked in a quiet street washed clean by a night of light rain. At the depot door, he keyed them in and turned on only the aisle lights they needed. Bay 11 waited with tall stacks and a ledger board half erased by dust. He powered a side terminal and slid a chair back for her. She didn't sit. She stood with both hands on the console's edges and watched the boot text run until the menu settled. "Left keys navigate," he said. "Enter selects. Escape steps back. Use the number row for codes. If a field is locked, the cursor won't change. Try search for EM 4713. She typed without looking at her fingers. The record loaded. She read the lines out loud, so the information landed in the room. Sale reclassed as labor. Early termination clause present. Notes empty. Status clear. "Good," he said, and moved half a step back so she could fill the space. "Show me crate indexing," she said. He pulled up the Bay map, set it side by side with the manifest, and let her trace the legend. She learned the color codes by association, not by rote. Within 10 minutes, she navigated faster than he did. Her mind linked to the pattern behind the grid. She stood long enough that he brought the stool closer, and she sat without breaking rhythm. "When you can edit," he said, "you'll write notes that make sense to someone who wasn't there." She opened a test field and felt the cursor blink under her hand. "Give me an edit you want," she said. "Bay 11, row 3, top tier," he said. "Mark the strap split we repaired, so no one assumes a factory defect." She typed the note clean and short, tagged it with the date, and saved. The field accepted the entry. She didn't smile. She nodded once at the screen, as if they had reached an agreement. They worked the stacks in silence, now with the terminal as a visible partner. When she lifted a crate, he read the tag aloud, and she confirmed it against the manifest, and either set it down where he pointed or corrected him before he moved, and he changed course without argument. The rhythm felt different. Not him directing and her lifting, but both of them working against the same set of numbers with the same authority. At the first break, she washed her hands and checked the salve strip from yesterday. The scrape looked clean. He watched for swelling and saw none. "Tonight," he said, "we oil the heater dial and your shoulder. The joint will work better with care." "Do my hands too," she said, holding them out. "The skin splits along the ridge when it dries." She said it like a mechanic listing a maintenance step, not like someone asking a favor. They ate at the canteen. A pair of night shift workers took the table near the door and argued softly about a broken winch until one of them noticed Neryl and lowered his volume by instinct. Corin leaned close enough to be heard without raising his voice. "After lunch, I want to move to the west wall and pull the old readers. We'll need to coordinate the lift. I'll talk you through the hooks." "I'll do the hooks," she said. "You take the stabilizer and the tag board. We'll move faster that way." He accepted the change and adjusted the plan in his head. Back at the bay, they switched positions without debate. She set the hooks with quick, exact motions, checked the weight, and signaled with a two-finger lift so he could read it even if he wasn't looking at her face. They cleared the wall in half the time he expected. He said so. She didn't answer with pride. She answered with a question. "Your brother," she said, eyes on the next crate. Voice even. "Why did he leave?" Corin slid a reader into the cart and considered. He wanted noise. "I wanted quiet. When the factory started close, he said it was time to stop holding up what others let fall. and he took a freight job out system. I stayed because someone needs to remember where things go. He called for a year, then he stopped calling. I don't know if that's because he didn't want to or because he couldn't. Do you think about leaving? She asked. Not while I can make a clean line from what was to what is, he said. I understand the city because I stay near its records. If I leave, I become a story I can't verify. She accepted the simplicity of it. I don't want to leave, she said. I want to walk in the square and close that fit and buy a bowl when I want one and have a key to a door that opens into a room where my name is said with care. That is all for now. He heard the word for what it was, plan, not speech. In the afternoon, she returned to the terminal and he took the cart to the far aisle. She entered notes without asking for confirmation. She marked a crate as high risk for movement because the lower tier had warped. She flagged a shipment mismatch for review. She corrected a date someone had transposed and added a line that explained the correction so the next person would understand it. She worked like a person who had waited a long time to write her name in places that mattered and had decided to use that chance with precision. An hour later, a clerk from Central stepped in, a young man with a careful haircut and handheld. He scanned the aisle and saw them both and straightened, as if reminded to perform his role. Routine spot check, he said. Show me the last 7 edits. Neryl turned the terminal so the screen faced him and scrolled to the log. The list showed her initials beside 3 entries. The clerk looked from the screen to her hands on the keys and paused the way people do when a picture in their head updates. You have edit access, he said. She does, Corin said. By my authorization. The clerk reviewed the notes. He reached the line about the transpose date, checked the physical tag, and nodded. Accepted, he said. Continue. He didn't ask why she was here. He didn't ask for anything beyond the work. He moved on. Neryl watched him go and let out a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. Not fear, anticipation cooling into nothing. They finished late. On the way home, the squares smelled like fried peppers and boiled grain. She bought a roll, tore it in half, and handed him the larger piece without comment. He took it because refusing would have been a statement she did not intend. They passed a trio of workers sharing a radio clipped to a crate. The voice on it read a list of outages and repairs. Routine, the city breathing. In the flat, they set dinner to heat and pulled the chair near the bed so he could reach the heater dial. He turned it off, loosened the faceplate with a small screwdriver, and lifted it free. Neryl leaned in and watched the dry hinge points. He dabbed oil on the contact, rotated the dial, and felt the stiffness ease. Your shoulder, he said, holding up the jar. You can do it, or I can. You tell me where and how much. She took the jar, dipped 2 fingers, and rubbed a line of oil over the place where the shift strap crossed muscle. She pressed once to map the tender spot. Here, she said, and handed him the jar. Small amount. He warmed the oil between his fingers and set them where she had pointed. He worked with the same method he used on the dial. Slow pressure, small circles, no guesswork beyond what she allowed. She exhaled through her nose and let the muscle release under his hands. When a wave of memory rose, it passed, and she tracked it without being taken by it. Enough, she said after a minute, and he lifted his hand and wiped his fingers on a clean cloth. They ate in comfortable quiet. After, she stood at the terminal he had moved into the corner of the room and practiced entries in a dummy file. He watched her eyes as she read and saw how fast she recognized a pattern error. You've done this before, he said. Not like this, she said, but I have sorted more than crates. When someone gives you a narrow rule and you exist outside it, you learn to build your own order so you don't get cut by theirs. He didn't answer with a lesson. He answered with a fact. I added you to the depot roster today as a staff worker with full notes access. It's not just for the week. It's ongoing. You can walk in and use your own card. She faced him. You are sure, she said, not doubting him, checking his choice against the weight it would carry. I'm sure, he said. Then tomorrow I'll arrive early, she said, and pull Bay 12's map before you get there. You can check my plan over tea. He let the picture form in his head. The door opening with her key, the terminal waiting for her, the work starting without him because she wanted it that way, and he felt the small, firm shift in his chest that meant pride without possession. Do that, he said. She stepped closer, standing between his knees where he sat on the stool. "I want to change the night again," she said, voice low and precise. "I want your hands under my tunic, over my ribs, and on my back, not higher than a strapline. I will set the pace." "Understood," he said. She took his hands and placed them as named. She lifted the hem, guided his palms to warm skin, and held them there. He didn't move until she did. When she pulled him closer by the collar and kissed him, she led with a steady pressure. No rush, no test, just a deliberate deepening. He followed the cues she gave, the tilt of her head, the way her breath shortened, the way her hands found his jaw and rested there. Minutes stretched. She lowered his right hand to the edge of her hip and felt the heat pool where skin met fabric. She raised his left hand to the safe edge at her back and stopped him there. "Hold," she said. He held. She moved against his hands to teach him her map without words. The hunger that rose was clean and controlled. When she felt the first edge of old panic flicker, she stepped back a fraction and waited. He didn't chase. The flicker died. She stepped in again, and the heat returned without the shadow. When they eased apart, she stayed close, forehead to his, both of them breathing quiet and even. "You want me," she said, not as a question, as an acknowledgement they both could stand on. "Yes," he said. "I want you. I want you too," she said. Not as proof, not as a fix, as you. He took that in as if it were a decision recorded in a ledger he respected. "Then we keep wanting," he said, "and we keep listening." She smiled, small and tired and satisfied, and moved to the bed. "Tonight you don't need the chair," she said. "Lie down. Clothes on. Lamp low. Your hand where I ask. If I sleep, you sleep." He lay beside her on top of the blanket. She placed his hand on her ribs, skin warm under his palm, and left it there. The room settled. The heater ticked. Somewhere in the building a door shut, and a lock slid into place. She closed her eyes and stayed awake a little longer, not from fear, but because she wanted to feel the shape of this new arrangement without missing it. "Corin," she said into the near dark. "I'm here," he said. "If I am late tomorrow," she said, "it will be because I stopped to buy a small pot. I want to cook once this week. Not because I owe you, because I want to use your kitchen the way a person uses their own." "Buy the pot," he said. "Pick the meal." She slept. He stayed still until her breathing steadied, then let his own eyes close. The day had answered what was left from the last. Whether she could own the terminal, whether the city would read her work and accept it, whether closeness could grow without tipping into something they hadn't named, whether his life could expand without his purpose shrinking. The answers were sober and solid. In the morning, she would open the depot with her own key. In the night, she had set new terms, and he had met them. The ledger for the day balanced. Neril reached the depot before the lamps finished warming. The side door recognized the new card and clicked open. The empty aisles held a low hum from the power strips. She turned on only the lights she needed and brought the terminal out of sleep. Her hands moved without hesitation. She pulled Bay 12's map, checked the manifest, and sketched a plan on the board in clean lines. Pull top tiers first. Rotate every third crate. Flag warped pallets. Prepare a transfer card for the West Dock. She ran a quick search on last week's mismatches and added 2 notes to prevent repeats. The screen took her initials without comment. She exhaled through her nose. Not relief, just confirmation. Corin arrived to the smell of hot dust from the light strips. He paused in the doorway when he saw the board. "Good," he said. "I would have done it the same way." "You have used a wider rotation," she said, pointing. "This holds better." "I see it," he said, and changed nothing. They worked side by side. She set the hooks and moved the first run. He took the stabilizer and read tags, adjusting to her pace instead of the other way around. At first break, he handed her tea and watched her flex a shoulder that no longer pinched. "The oil helped," he said. "It did," she said. "Your hands did." By midday, Bay 12 was half cleared. A central clerk, a different one, older, with a tired face, stepped in with a handheld. He looked from Corin to Neril to the open terminal. "Access check," he said, voice polite and flat. Neril turned the screen, already on the log. "You want the last 10 edits?" she asked. He nodded. She scrolled. He read. At her note about the warped pallets, he glanced at the stack and saw she had already braced the lower row with a cross strip. Efficient, he said. He tapped the handheld, the entry turned green, and he moved on without another word. Nero watched him go and felt a tight band in her chest release another notch. Not approval, not acceptance, just the simple fact of being read and recorded as competent. In the afternoon, she went alone to the square for a small pot. She chose a medium weight with a firm base, checked the handle for a clean rivet, and paid without bargaining. On the way back, the boy from the auction saw her at the corner, slowed, and then faced her directly as if he had decided to finish something he had started badly. "Are you all right?" he asked. Eyes on her face, not her body. "I am," she said. He nodded, awkward and sincere. "Good." He moved on. The exchange lasted less than 5 seconds, but it closed a loop that had been left open in her head. She returned to the depot with the pot in a canvas bag and hung it on a hook by the door for later. They finished the bay late. Corin wrote the day's totals and closed the terminal with a soft key press. On the walk home, they picked up a bundle of greens and a small piece of cured meat. Rain started, fine and steady, and beaded on her sleeves. He handed her the key at the door without ceremony. She unlocked it. Inside, she washed the pot twice out of habit, set it on the heater plate, and started water. She cut the greens with a small knife, steady strokes, turning the bunch as she worked. He watched from the table, hands idle for the first time that day. "You cook like you stack crates," he said. "I cook like I want the food to taste the same each time," she said. Predictable is useful. She added the meat, a pinch of salt, and barley from a jar. The smell shifted the room from metal and paper to food. She moved without hurry, testing the pot's weight, listening for the right simmer. When it was ready, she filled 2 bowls, set one in front of him, and stood at the edge of the table until he took the first bite. "It's good," he said, no extra words, no performance. She ate then, slow and steady. The meal warmed her chest in a way that made her feel present and anchored. She liked the feeling of cooking here and planned the next time without telling him, because deciding on her own was part of the point. After dishes, she faced him, set her palms on the table, and spoke with the clarity she used for work plans. "I am ready to change the nights again," she said. "No chair, no clothes as barrier. Consent stays the rule. I will speak. You will listen. We move forward only where I name and stop where I stop. If I freeze, you wait. If I want, I say want." He met her eyes and answered without pause. "Yes," he said. "I want you. I want this. I will listen." She walked to the bed and untied her tunic. She folded it and placed it on the crate. He took off his shirt and set it on the chair, no flourish. The lamp stayed low. The heater held a steady tick. She sat and pulled him to sit with her close and square. She took his hands and placed them on her skin where she had mapped safety, ribs back below the strap line, the outside of her hip. He held exactly where she set him and did not reach for more. She kissed him, slow at first, then longer, letting the contact build in layers she controlled. He matched her pressure and followed her breath. She guided his hand higher by a small distance and watched her body for any rise of alarm. None. She guided it higher again and felt heat roll through her chest and down her stomach, clean and strong. He moved when she moved him. When she stopped, he stopped. She spoke between breaths, so both of them stayed present. "Good. There. Hold. More. Slow." He answered with a simple rhythm of yes and here and I'm with you. When the old reflex tried to enter, a fast heartbeat that had nothing to do with want, she pressed her forehead to his and counted. He counted with her. It passed. She kept going because she chose to. He stayed with her because she asked. When she finally drew back, she didn't leave his arms. She rested, chest rising and falling against him, skin warm, muscles loose from effort, mind clear. There was nothing performative in it, no idea to prove, no shadow of the auction in the room. There was only the plain fact of 2 bodies allowed to want and a door that locked. She lifted her head. "I want to say it now," she said, steady and calm. "I want you. I want this life with you. Not because you saved me, because I choose you." He didn't rush to answer. He traced the words in his head once and spoke them back. "I choose you," he said. "Every day. With the work. With the nights. With the records. With the food. With the quiet. She nodded and kissed him again, shorter, not less intense, just certain. Later, with the lamp still low, they lay on the bed with the blanket over their legs. She placed his hand on her stomach, not as a hint, not as a signal, just as a simple placement that felt right. He kept it there, warm and steady. She watched the ceiling for a long breath. "I want one more change," she said. "Tomorrow, add my name to your door card at the front desk. Not as a dependent, as co-tenant. If anyone ever asks, I live here by choice." "Yes," he said. "I'll do it on my lunch." "And the depot roster," she added. "Make the note permanent. If you leave the city one day, the system should still know I worked here with full access." "It already does," he said. "I made it permanent this morning." She turned her head and looked at him, surprised not by the action, but by the timing. "You did it before I asked." "I knew you would ask," he said, "and I wanted to meet you there." She absorbed that and let a small, quiet smile show. No one had met her there before. Sleep came late. When it did, it was heavy and clean. In the morning, her body told her she had worked hard the day before, and also that something inside had shifted from guarded to ready. She stood, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, and made tea while the lamps brightened by degrees. Corin watched her move through the room like she owned it, because she did. At the door, before they left for the depot, she paused with her hand on the knob. "I want to try," she said, looking straight at him so there was no mistaking her meaning. "Not to prove anything, not to fix anything, to make a future if it comes." "We try," he said. No promise, no timetable, only consent. On the way down the stairwell, the neighbor in the patch cardigan passed them carrying a basket of laundry. She glanced at Neryl, then at Corin, then at their joined pace, and gave a short, genuine nod that acknowledged what was obvious without prying. Neryl returned it with the same small honesty. They reached the front desk. Corin handed over his ident and requested the card update. The clerk typed, printed a strip, and slid a new key across the counter with both names on the label. Corin Thale/Neryl. No comment, no delay, just a procedural change that marked the life they were already living. Neryl took the key and clipped it to her belt. At the depot, she opened the door with her card first. She walked to the terminal and pulled Bay 13's map without waiting for him to suggest it. She stood straight, shoulders easy, eyes clear. He watched her for a second longer than usual, not because he doubted her, but to mark the moment the shape of their days became something stable. Late in the morning, a brief wave of dizziness passed through her. She steadied a hand on the console until the room settled. He noticed and moved closer without touching. "Water," he said, and handed her a cup. "It's nothing," she said. She drank, waited, and it was nothing. She filed it away, not as a warning, but as a detail to watch. They worked until evening. On the way home, she bought a small bunch of sweet fruit from a vendor who rarely had them. She took one, bit into it, and closed her eyes at the taste. He took one when she offered. The day ended the way she liked days to end now. Work done, food in hand, a key on her belt, and a room waiting where her name belonged. Before sleep, she placed his hand on her stomach again and covered it with hers. "If nothing happens," she said, "we are still this." "We are still this," he said. She slept with that answer in her body. He lay awake a few minutes longer, counting the steady signs of life they were building. Her name on the door card, her initials in the edit log, the pot cooling on the heater plate, the ledger balance for the day. And then he slept too, ready to close the story in a way that left nothing hanging. 6 months passed without the city shifting against them. The depot became their shared ground. Her initials on half the edits, her handwriting in the margin notes, her voice as common in the aisles as his. The front desk clerk greeted them both by name now. No glance of curiosity, no hesitation before handing over messages. In the square, vendors she once passed unseen nodded or called out prices without looking to Corin first. She moved through the streets with the same steady stride she used in the bays, shoulders level, eyes direct. At home, their patterns had settled into something that didn't need to be spoken. She cooked twice a week, precise and consistent. He brewed tea every morning. The heater dial turned smooth after his repair and her regular oiling. The chair stayed against the wall now. The bed was theirs in all seasons. Boundaries remained, But they weren't fences anymore, just lines they both knew and could cross together when she said. One rain-heavy morning, she paused halfway through dressing for work, standing by the table with her hand resting low on her stomach. Cor noticed, not with alarm, but with the quiet focus he reserved for details that mattered. She met his eyes and didn't make him ask. "Yes," she said simply. He set down the ledger he'd been packing into his satchel. "You're sure?" "I am," she said. Her tone held none of the old uncertainty, none of the weight of other people's verdicts. "The clinic will confirm it, but I know." He stepped her close enough to feel her breath. "Then we billed for 3. She nodded once, satisfied by the lack of ceremony. "We keep working until I decide when to stop," she said. "And we keep the roster in your name," he added. No change. The weeks that followed moved in the same clean rhythm as before. She kept at the terminal until her balance shifted and the higher tiers went to him. The depot clerks treated her with the same plain efficiency as any worker. At home, the bed grew softer with extra blankets. The kitchen shelf held jars she had chosen, and a small stack of folded cloths appeared in the corner without either of them pointing it out. When the clinic confirmed what they already knew, they left together without lingering in the waiting room. In the square, they bought fresh bread, still warm from the oven, and walked back under the early light. Inside the flat, she set the bread down, turned to him, and spoke with the same measured certainty she'd used when she first named her terms. "We are not here because you took me from a platform," she said. "We are here because I walked with you afterward and did not stop. That's the story I will tell our child." He took her hands and squeezed once. "And I'll tell them their mother wrote her name into a ledger and made it matter." They stood like that until the smell of bread reminded them to eat. The day went on as all their days had: work, food, the slow build of something lasting. By evening, they lay together in the quiet, her head on his shoulder, his hand over hers where it rested on the new curve of her stomach. Outside, Dornis Reach breathed its usual mix of steam and rain, but inside, there was nothing left uncertain. They had a home. They had work that was theirs. They had each other by choice, not accident. And now, they had a future they had decided on together. When the lamps dimmed, she closed her eyes and said the same words she'd spoken the first night she'd allowed him to stay close. "Stay. I'll stay," he said, and he always would.